He studied the birds carefully. They all had different beak shapes. Some were bigger than others. They were all finches, but different kinds of finches. Charlie studied them for quite a while, collected quite a huge number of them, and said, you know what? I think all of these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. A bird. And then he said, maybe this proves that birds are related to bananas. What? No. Page 170 of his book, he said all forms of life on earth, all plants, all animals have a common ancestor. Page 170. What he saw is what we sometimes call microevolution. Now this is the entire debate right here. Microevolution is one meaning of the word, which is basically saying that dogs produce a variety of dogs, roses produce a variety of roses. Nobody argues with that. Microevolution is a fact. It is scientific. It is observable. That's what farmers do for a living. They try to make that happen. They try to get a better species of whatever they're raising for their area. And the animals do have a wide range of adaptations they can take on. But these adaptations have limits. Farmers been trying to get bigger and bigger pigs for a long time, but they'll never get a pig as big as Texas. There's a limit in there someplace. Roaches eventually become resistant to pesticides, no question about that, but there's a limit. Two things you need to understand. The resistance to the pesticide was already in the roach population, maybe just a small percentage of it, and when you do end up with a resistant population of roaches, you're swimming in the shallow end of the gene pool now for the roaches. Next thing you need to understand, there's a limit to this resistance. They might become resistant to these pesticides, but they will never become resistant to a sledgehammer. So, yes, there's variations, no question, I agree, that happens. But what happens then is that professors try to make the students see thousands of examples of microevolution, which is indeed a science. And they try to make them make a giant leap of faith and logic into believing that that somehow magically is evidence for macroevolution. Macroevolution says all life forms have a common ancestor. The dog and the rose are related, ultimately, to a rock. Now, macroevolution is a religion. This is assumed. It has never been observed. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. Now, if somebody wants to believe dogs came from non-dogs, you can believe that, but that's not science. That's your religion. It's based on imagination. It's fantasy. You might get a big dog and a little dog, and they're still related. And except for a few mechanical problems, they're still interfertile. They could produce a dog. See, maybe even the dog and the wolf and the coyote are related. Okay, boys and girls, we have a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is not like the others? And a 3-year-old can tell you. They're still the same kind of animal. Probably the horse and the zebra are related. I wouldn't argue about that. Stand 30 feet away and look at it. It's obviously not a banana. We're dealing with the same kind of animal here, folks. So the whole problem is, as I've seen it in my debates, and I do thousands of radio and TV talk shows, the evolutionists always are able to give hundreds of examples of microevolution. And then they want you to believe that this somehow proves macroevolution. And students are deceived by this by the thousands every day, because the professor says, well, look, we see this, these rabbits became resistant to these pesticides. Or the rats, we got the super rat in Chicago became resistant to the pesticides. Well, yeah, still a rat. It's not evolution, folks. It's a variation. It's microevolution. Don't be confused by that. Textbook, though, says mutations provide the source of variations. Well, this is true. But the mutations are harmful, fatal, neutral, or if you do get one that's beneficial, which nobody's really proven a good beneficial mutation, that can take over the population. Who's this good beneficial mutation character going to marry? And then who are its kids going to marry? Anything's going to be blended back into the population. Here's a short-legged sheep. Textbook says this mutation would not last in nature. Well, of course not, man. He's the first one the wolf is going to catch. Textbook says natural selection causes evolution. Nothing could be further from the truth. Creationists have nothing against natural selection. We thought of it first. Natural selection is sort of like God's quality control. I worked in Pontiac, Michigan for 2 years at the truck and coach plant up there when I was going to school. We built trucks. They came down the assembly line. When it got to the end, somebody checked it. Quality control. If it didn't work or something was wrong, it was rejected. That's normal. Every factory has a quality control. Now suppose you had a quality control section that was eagle-eyed, they caught every mistake. Nothing got by those guys. How long would it take that process to change the truck to a helicopter? You say it'll never change it to a helicopter. Precisely my point. And natural selection will never change an animal to a new kind of animal. It'll only keep the species strong. And it might allow the species to adapt to a new environment. We now have Alaska rabbits that are able to survive in 20 below zero. And we have Florida rabbits that are able to survive in 100 degrees. And they are not interfertile. They're considered a different subspecies, maybe even a different species. I don't know. Now, both of those, Alaska rabbits and Florida rabbits, can breed with Minnesota rabbits. They're kind of in the middle. Okay. And they're going to say, see, this is evolution. No, it's a variation, and it's still a rabbit. That doesn't prove we came from a rock, folks. That's just a variety. That's all it is. And that's all that can ever be offered is examples of variation. For instance, the fruit fly experiment we did in biology class many times. They raised flies in the laboratory, they nuked them, they microwaved them, they x-rayed them. They got those flies to have mutated babies, curled wings. They fly around, buzz, couldn't go anywhere. They got flies with no wings. What do you call that? A crawl? Can't fly. But they always got a fly, and it was always worse off than great-great-great-great-grandpa fly. But that's always given as an example for evolution. They show the kids the peppered moth as evidence for evolution. Most of the moths in England, they went around and counted them on the trees. Must have been a government project. They discovered it was 95% light-colored moths, only 5% black. Then they burned coal in the factories for a while, and the trees turned black, and the population shifted to 95% black moths. They said, wow, look at this, evolution. The white moth evolved to a black moth. No. You see, the black and white variety was already in the gene pool. They never did get a pink one or a purple one. The genetic information was already there. All they got was a shift in the population ratio. And when they quit burning the coal in the factories, the trees turned white again, and the moths shifted right back to light-colored moths. And this is considered one of the best examples known for evolution. Industrial melanism. Started off a moth, it ended up a moth. That proves we came from a rock, boys and girls. Write that down, that'll be on the test. They show the kids different forelimb structures of the animals. 2 bones in the wrist, the radius and the ulna. The whale has 2 bones, the radius and the ulna. They're going to say, see, boys and girls, you can compare the forelimbs of all these animals, and comparative anatomy provides further evidence of evolution. The commonality suggests these and other animals are all related. They probably evolved from a common ancestor. Excuse me. Might be 2 ways to look at that. That might prove they have a common designer. Did you know the lug nuts from a Chevy will screw onto a Pontiac? That proves they both evolved from a Honda 38 million years ago. What we have here, folks, is an example of good observation and bad conclusions. Maybe you heard the story about the scientists were going to see how far the frog could jump. They set the frog down and said, jump, frog, jump. Frog jumped 80 inches. Brought him back, cut off one leg. Jump, frog, jump. He only jumped 70 inches. Brought him back, cut off another leg. Jump, frog, jump. He only jumped 60 inches. Brought him back, cut off his third leg. Jump, frog, jump. He only jumped 50 inches. Brought him back, cut off his last leg. Said, jump, frog, jump. Frog didn't jump. He said, jump, frog. Frog didn't jump. They concluded, every time we cut a leg off, the frog jumped less. Therefore, we feel that when you take all 4 legs off of a frog, he goes deaf. Now look, you got a good observation, but that's the wrong conclusion, all right? And the commonality of the forelimbs of the animals is a good observation. I agree with that, but it's not a good conclusion to conclude they have a common ancestor. They got a common designer. Very few things anger me about the evolution theory more than this idea of the human embryo having gill pouches. Made up by Ernst Haeckel in 1869, proven wrong in 1874. He faked the drawings of the embryos, made up a phrase, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. It was proven that he lied. There's the real pictures of these embryos compared to his drawings up above. I mean, it was a total fraud. He finally confessed to fraud at his own university. They had a trial against one of their professors. He confessed to drawing from memory and was convicted of fraud at the University of Jena, 1874. But the idea of ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, or the human embryo having gill slits, or going through the stages of evolution during development, is still in textbooks today, and I guarantee it's in this university right now, proven wrong 125 years ago. I was going through some stuff in the textbooks that's not true one time, and one professor said, well, what would you replace it with? What he was trying very hard to not say is, we want the kids to believe this evolution, and these are the only examples we have, and if you take these away, they might not believe in evolution. Precisely the point. Look, if you got some evidence for animals changed into a different kind, I'd like to see it. But if you don't have any evidence, then quit teaching it as science and call it a religion. That's why for many years I've offered $10,000 for anybody with any real scientific evidence for evolution. I'd like to see it. I'll write you a check. There is none, folks. There's lots of evidence for microevolution, but that's still a variety. It's the same kind of animal. This is kept in the textbooks, I think, because that's the only way to justify abortion. They want to say it's not a human yet. Well, it's a human the instant it's conceived, and abortion is murder, plain and simple. And I'll stick by that one with anybody. Time up. Textbooks say we have appendix, which is a vestigial structure. One of the evidences for evolution is supposed to be vestigial structures. Now think about that logic. They'll say, boys and girls, you are slowly losing something. Which is not true, by the way. There are no vestigial structures. But they'll say, you're slowly losing something. Okay. See, that proves evolution. Well, hold it. That's the opposite of evolution. Is that how evolution works? You lose everything until you have it all? This textbook says the whale has a vestigial pelvis. Now, the author that writes about the whale having a vestigial pelvis is either ignorant or a liar. That's not a vestigial pelvis. Muscles have to attach to those bones because the whales cannot reproduce without those bones. They have nothing to do with walking on land. Absolutely nothing to do. That is propaganda. That's not science. This textbook tells the kids, just imagine whales walking around. It's true. That's a kid's book. That's propaganda. That's a lie. This one says humans have a tailbone that is of no apparent use. I did a debate with the president of the North Alabama Atheist Association, and he said, folks, we got proof for evolution. The human tailbone, the coccyx, is vestigial. You don't need it anymore. When it was my turn, I got up and I said, Mr. Patterson, I taught biology and anatomy. I happen to know there are 9 muscles that attach to the tailbone. If you think the tailbone is vestigial, I will pay to have yours removed. Without them little muscles, there's some very, very valuable things you cannot do. I won't tell you what they all are, but trust me, you need them muscles. Now, we can go on a long time, folks, but my point is this. Both views, creation and evolution, are inherently religious. I cannot prove God created the world, and I cannot prove there was a worldwide flood. I can show you the evidence of billions of dead things buried in rock layers. And I can show you that out west, when they killed millions of buffalo in the last 200 years, almost none of them fossilized because they weren't buried. The very existence of fossils is evidence to me of a worldwide flood. When they climbed Mount Everest in 1953, they found seashells by the thousands on top of Mount Everest. I think there was a flood. I don't think the water was over Mount Everest. I think Mount Everest was under the water. The mountains arose during the last part of the flood. The Bible spells all that out in Psalms chapter 104. The mountains arose, the valley sank down, and the water rushed off and probably made Grand Canyon in a few days, not millions of years. So I think the evidence is overwhelming. God made the world. There was a flood that destroyed it, and God's got a plan for you. And He loves you. And if you don't want to believe in Him, that's fine, but He'd like you to. He's not going to twist your arm. But the evidence, I think, is overwhelming, and the evidence for the evolution theory is confused by mixing micro and macro. So watch for that, if you would. Thank you so much.
That was dazzling, to say the least. Can you hear now? I realize I have a small voice, although I'd like to think that I have some reasonably big thoughts. But I'm going to have to sit, and because in order to make a fairly complete, concise statement about evolution and about the problems with Kent Hovind's approach with his analysis of evolution, I have to read this. Let me start by expressing some reservations I have in engaging this debate at all. I'm a professional evolutionary biologist in that I have taught evolution and related courses here at Wayne in genetics, statistics, ornithology, and a number of other courses for 27 years. And over those 27 years, I've maintained an active research program looking at problems in evolution concern primarily